Then Pax paused, gasping for breath. She captured 3 human children from their educational facility on Colony World 7. The room's temperature seemed to plummet by several degrees. Castrix's secondary heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, his voice was little more than a whisper. The mission was supposed to be routine surveillance of human education methods. Pax continued, voice cracking, but Captain Venn decided to take initiative. Castrix slammed all 6 of his hands onto the desk, causing the holographic projectors to flicker and blink. Give me a direct link to her ship. Now! Turning toward the wall of data screens behind him, he quickly began pulling up every file he had on human parental responses, frantically searching for anything that might help him understand the disaster unfolding. Contact the High Council, he ordered, his voice tense. Mark it as an extinction-level crisis. Extinction level? Surely you're overreacting, sir. Pax twitched nervously, antennae flicking in uncertainty. Castrix snapped his attention to a file on the Human Relian War of 2184. Do you know what happened to the last species that dared to harm human children? He played the footage. The Raelians thought capturing a human juvenile would give them leverage. Let me show you how many of their worlds are still habitable. Pax's scales turned pale, drained of color. I'll contact the council immediately. While you're at it, pull up everything we have on human military response times, Castrix added, his voice hard. And get me Admiral Chin on the quantum line. She might be the only human who will still talk to us after this. Castrix's tendrils curled in agitation as he observed real-time data streams showing human fleet movements. They were already mobilizing. On the hollow screen in front of him, Captain Ven's face materialized, her expression still proud, oblivious to the catastrophe she had just set in motion. Senior Intelligence Officer, Ven began, her tone full of excitement, I've made an amazing breakthrough in our research. These human larvae are fascinating, their cognitive development. Castrix cut her off, his voice ice cold. In approximately 6 hours, you will face a combined might of every human military vessel within 50 light years. Their special forces teams are already deploying. Do you understand what you've done? Ven's confident smile faltered. But they're just children. We've treated them well. They've been given adequate nutrition, comfortable containment pods. Comfortable containment? Castrix had to force himself to stay calm. Captain, humans don't view their young as specimens. Those aren't test subjects in your holds. Those are their babies. The color drained from Captain Ven's face as the weight of his words sank in. In the 30 years since first contact, do you know what the only consistent trait we've found in every human culture is? Castrix continued, their fundamental, unshakable drive to protect their young. It doesn't matter if they're from Earth, Mars, or the furthest colony. It doesn't matter if they share genetic material. Every human adult will fight to the death to protect any human child. Suddenly, warning signals blared throughout the intelligence wing. Pax hurried back to the screens, now nearly white with anxiety. Sir, we're detecting multiple human warships dropping out of hyperspace. They're everywhere. Castrix watched as hundreds and thousands of human vessels appeared on his screens, their weapons primed and hot. He had never seen such rapid mobilization before. Listen very carefully, Captain, Castrix said, his voice low and urgent. You have exactly one chance to survive this. Send a message to every human channel. Tell them the children are safe and unharmed. Tell them you're bringing them back immediately. No conditions, no negotiations, no delays. As Captain Ven's image flickered off the screen, Castrix turned to his lieutenant. Pax, do you know why I survived 20 cycles as head of human intelligence? Pax shook his head, still pale. Because I learned one crucial thing on my first day, Castrix said. Humans are generally peaceful, often forgiving, and usually reasonable. But you threaten their children, then they become something else entirely. He watched as more ships appeared, filling the screens. And we just threatened their children. Captain Ven paced nervously in her command chamber aboard the research vessel Stellar Seeker, the sound of her claws clicking against the metallic floor. The memory of how she had executed her plan now felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her multiple stomachs. Recording personal log. Timestamp 344 2.7. She murmured into the ship's computer. I suppose I should document how I managed to commit what might be the biggest diplomatic disaster in Galactic Union history. She paused, watching the security feed showing the 3 human children in their containment pods. They were small, maybe 8 years old, wearing peculiar fabric coverings in bright colors. One of them wore something with a cartoon character she didn't recognize. It seemed so logical at the time, Ven continued, her tendrils drooping with shame. Our understanding of human psychological development has been limited to observation and theoretical models. When I saw the opportunity during our routine surveillance of their learning center, what they call an elementary school, I thought I would be commended for my initiative. The ship's AI played back the sequence of events from 12 hours earlier. Ven watched herself, cloaked in the latest stealth technology, approaching the human educational facility during their recess period. The playground, as humans called it, was filled with children engaging in various activities. It seemed like the perfect moment. We targeted 3 subjects who moved to the far corner of the playground, Ven narrated, her voice heavy with regret. It seemed like a simple operation. Capture the young ones, analyze their behavior, and return them to the ship. But now, it didn't feel simple at all. The recreational area was supposed to be a quick, efficient operation. Short-range teleporters made it easy to move the children without causing harm. The footage showed the moment Ven selected her subjects, 2 girls and 1 boy, all playing a game humans call hopscotch. They seemed like perfect specimens, displaying cognitive planning, social cooperation, and physical coordination. Ven had even prepared their containment areas, outfitting them with items from their cultural database. Entertainment devices, nutritionally optimized human food, and soft sleeping surfaces. I thought I was being considerate, she murmured, laughing bitterly at the irony. The video showed the teleportation sequence. One moment, the children were laughing and playing. The next, they vanished in a shimmer of light. No one noticed for nearly 3 minutes. But when they did, Ven switched the feed to external cameras. This was the beginning of my education in human parental response patterns, she admitted. The footage showed the first human adult noticing the missing children. The speed at which the situation escalated was shocking. Within seconds, other adults converged. Within minutes, security forces arrived. Within an hour, the entire colony was on lockdown. And that was when Ven first heard it, the sounds the humans made. Our translation software identified it as keening, she continued. The sounds of mothers made when they realized their children were gone. I'd never heard anything like it. Ven switched to the current external feeds. The space around her ship was now filled with human vessels, military ships, civilian ships, mining vessels retrofitted with weapons, each one converging on her location. They just kept coming. The first response came from a human female named Sarah Martinez. Ven narrated. She wasn't military. She wasn't law enforcement. She was what humans call a lunch lady at the school. Ven pulled up the footage of Sarah. She had spotted the cloaked ship because, as they later learned, her brother worked in human counter-surveillance. Sarah recognized the distortion pattern and immediately sprang into action. The footage showed her running to her personal vehicle, activating some kind of emergency beacon, and making calls on her communication device. Within minutes, the human defense grid was activated. Did you know, Ven added, that humans have a protocol called Code Adam, named after a child who was taken and killed many years ago? When a child goes missing, everything stops. Everyone helps. Everyone. Ven's voice grew shakier as she watched the unfolding tactical display. I thought the response to a Code Atom in a shopping center was impressive. I had no idea it applied on an interstellar scale. The ship's computer chimed again with another warning. More human ships were arriving, so many that the tactical computer had trouble keeping count. The humans have a saying, Ven murmured, her voice trembling. It takes a village to raise a child. What I failed to understand was a corollary. Every village will rise to protect its children. Ven glanced at the containment pods again. The children had stopped crying hours ago, but their silence was even worse. One of them, the smaller girl, was clutching something she had in her pocket when teleported, a worn piece of fabric, identified by the database as a baby blanket. I have learned that humans are not like us, Ven recorded, her voice quiet. We raise our young in controlled environments, monitored by designated caregivers. Humans, every adult human sees themselves as a potential protector of every child. They don't care if they're genetically related. They don't care if they know them personally. Ven's sensors picked up another wave of ships arriving. This time, they were different, sleek, military, and dangerous. The humans have a term, Mama Bear, she said. I thought it was just colorful language. I didn't understand it was a warning. We have now angered every Mama Bear in 50 light years, and the Papa Bears, and the Tail Bears, and the Grandma Bears. The ship's computer interrupted with a priority message. The humans had sent terms. They weren't negotiating. They weren't threatening. They were simply stating facts. Return the children unharmed immediately or be destroyed. Then look one last time at the children in their pods, now understanding. They weren't specimens. They were treasures. Each one precious beyond measure to an entire species, willing to burn down the galaxy to get them back. Ven's whisper barely cut through the hum of the ship's console. Begin transmission to all human channels, she ordered, her voice tight with urgency. As the signal connected, she added, Message begins. I am returning your children. They are safe. I am sorry. I didn't understand. Now I do. It was an apology, though she barely understood the weight of it. How could she? In her world, specimens were collected, analyzed, and studied. It had been the only reality she had known for centuries. But now, staring at the silent faces of the human children she had taken, now returned to their parents, she had learned too much in too little time. Castrix stood before the holographic archive, his 4 eyes scanning the historical records as he awaited news from Captain Ven's ship. The glowing screens flickered as they populated with incident reports dating back to humanity's first contact with the galactic civilization. He knew what he was about to read. He had studied these events. But each time, the horror and consequences of humanity's response had never been clearer. Computer, Castrix commanded, his voice smooth yet heavy with anticipation. Display case file 2184, the Relian incident. The screen flared to life, and a report appeared with a simple statement that made Castrix's exoskeletal body tense. The complete annihilation of the Relian Empire could be traced to a single event involving 2 human children on a colony world. Castrix's multiple hands curled into fists as he read the report. He had studied the Relian incident numerous times, but the story never failed to impact him. He could almost feel the heat radiating from the molten surface of the Relian homeworld. The Relians had been overconfident, impervious to the notion that any species could strike back at them. 3,000 years of military supremacy, 12 star systems, advanced technologies, yet it had all evaporated in a mere 6 months, all because of one decision to capture 2 human children. They had thought that stealing human children would force the humans to enter negotiations over mining rights, believing that such an act would pressure humanity into submission. They had thought wrong. The moment the Relians made the fatal mistake, human forces had been mobilized with terrifying speed. Castrix's sensors flashed as he reviewed the footage of the aftermath. A world turned to glass by weapons the Relians had no idea existed. It had been swift, brutal, unforgiving, and the Relians were no more. Castrix's mind raced as the historical file faded and another incident report loaded. The Morgan Colony Incident 2192. He pressed a button, and the new footage streamed across his desk. The Zex, an alien species from a distant galaxy, had made the mistake of underestimating humanity. Their goal had been simple, to study human children through covert observation. But their covert operation had been discovered. The Zex, rather than retreating, had insisted that their scientific endeavors justified their actions. They refused to leave the colony, claiming that their research was necessary for the future of their species. But the humans, in their unyielding devotion to protect their young, had shown no tolerance for such blatant disrespect. The footage showed what happened next, an act of rebellion not with weapons, but with pure human determination. The humans had simply released the mothers of the colony into this reobservation post. The researchers had been overwhelmed. 2 of them never recovered from a psychological trauma. The rest? They had been hospitalized for weeks. Humans, Castrix muttered, his tendrils curling. They fight not with weapons, but with love. And when their children are threatened, they become something else entirely. Lieutenant Pax entered the room, carrying more data crystals, interrupting Castrix's reverie. He nodded at Pax, gesturing for him to present the findings. Pax obediently connected the crystals to the display, and a series of videos filled the room's projection. Human parents, mothers and fathers alike, were shown performing unbelievable feats of strength and courage. A small human female was seen lifting an entire ground transport vehicle to free her trapped child. Another video showed a male human fending off a massive predatory beast with nothing but his bare hands, all to protect a child who wasn't even his own. Countless examples flooded the screen. Adults stepping between children and danger without hesitation, without fear. There was no concern for their own safety. Every adult was a protector of the next generation, no matter whose child it was. Notice the pattern, Pax, Castrix said, pointing at the data. These humans show no regard for their own survival when a child is threatened. Their neural scans during these events are fascinating. The normal fear response? Completely suppressed. It's as if they become something else entirely, something stronger, more primal. Pax's scales paled further as he processed the data. He looked at the screen, his antennae twitching nervously. I found something else, Pax said, his voice low. The Eronian Defense Force records from 2198. A simulation, human military response times. Show me, Castrix ordered. The display shifted, and a new incident appeared on the screen. It showed a holographic simulation created by the Eronian Defense Force, an attempt to test human military response times by simulating a threat to a human nursery. However, the Eronians didn't actually threaten any children. It was only a simulation. Castrix scrolled through the footage, watching as human forces responded with astounding speed. But it wasn't the speed that was most alarming. It was the intensity, the unwavering determination to protect the children. Even when none were in danger, the Eronians had miscalculated the simulation's effectiveness. The simulation signal had been detected by the humans, and they had immediately mobilized to confront the perceived threat. The Eronians don't run military drills anymore, Castrix said, his voice grave. They don't run much of anything anymore. New alerts flashed across the screens, pulling Castrix's attention away from the historical records. The human ships were arriving in droves. The tactical computer struggled to process the sheer number of vessels pouring into the area. Every few seconds, more ships materialized, hundreds, then thousands. It was as though the human race had never stopped responding to threat. Look at this, Pax, Castrix said, highlighting a particular data stream. The humans have a concept called protective custody. When a child is in danger, their legal system allows any qualified adult to temporarily assume parental authority, even if they're not the biological parent. Do you understand what this means? Pax's expression darkened, his scales turning even paler. Are you saying that every adult human within range can legally act as a parent to those children? Castrix nodded slowly. Exactly. And their response to this threat will be overwhelming. It won't just be the military. It will be every human adult, every parent, every protector, because they have the cultural and legal authority to act on behalf of these children. Pax's voice trembled. So, they will come for us. Every human within 100 light years will rally around those children. They won't stop until they have them back. Castrix sighed deeply. And that is the mistake we made. We didn't just capture children. We captured something far more valuable, a treasure that no human will let go. The images on the screen were a blur of incoming ships, their weapons primed and their systems at full readiness. The humans were coming, not for war, but for something much more personal. They were coming for what was theirs, for what they would protect at all costs. Get me the captain, Castrix commanded, his voice steely. Now! Pax scrambled to comply, his antennae flicking nervously. The ship's communication systems hummed to life, sending out a call to Ven's vessel. Meanwhile, Castrix's mind churned, processing the data faster than his body could keep up. This was no longer just a diplomatic misstep. This was something deeper. This was a lesson that would reverberate throughout the galaxy for centuries to come. Humans, Castrix murmured to himself. They will fight for their children, and that makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Castrix stood motionless before the screens, his mind working furiously to anticipate humanity's next move. He knew one thing for certain. They were not going to back down. The humans would not stop until every last one of their children was safe. And if that meant annihilating everything in their path, they would do it. We have no choice now, Castrix muttered. We either return the children or we face extinction. The lesson was clear. When you threaten a human child, you do not just face the wrath of a parent. You face the collective might of a species determined to protect their future, no matter the cost. The cold, sterile hum of the command center was the only sound in the vast, otherwise empty space. It echoed in the high-ceilinged room, the oppressive quiet punctuated only by the soft, distant whispers of artificial systems, algorithms churning, security protocols humming, and communications channels flickering. Ven stood motionless at the center of it all, her fingers brushing against the control panel. Despite the cold technological surroundings, a deep weight bore down on her shoulders. The transmission was ready. Begin transmission to all human channels. Ven's voice broke through the stillness. The words were quiet, but laden with gravity. There was a small hesitation, the briefest of moments, before she added, "Message begins." The words flickered to life on the screen, as though written in blood, stark and undeniable. "I am returning your children. They are safe. I am sorry. I didn't understand. Now I do." The transmission ended with that, and Ven stared at the screen, a deep silence settling over her as she absorbed the consequences of her actions. This was not a mistake she could undo, but perhaps she could make amends. She had learned something tonight, something that had changed her entire perspective, something that had rewritten everything she thought she knew about this strange, unpredictable species. Meanwhile, far away in the nerve center of the Galactic Union, Senior Intelligence Officer Castrix was a being of cold calculation, his mind a labyrinth of patterns, strategies, and data. The room before him was filled with holographic projections, flickering with images of human encounters, first contact, diplomatic crises, skirmishes, and full-blown wars. The archive was vast and endless, stretching back eons, each report a brushstroke in the dark history of the human race. Castrix had learned long ago not to be fooled by their appearances. The humans were volatile, unpredictable, but they were also something more, something that defied the logic of the galaxy. "Computer," Castrix ordered, his voice cutting to the thick silence. "Display case file 2184, the Relian incident." The file materialized before him, a record of one of the most disastrous encounters in galactic history. A simple entry, seemingly inconspicuous at first. The complete annihilation of the Relian Empire, one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, could be traced to a single event involving 2 human children. Castrix's 4 eyes flicked over the data, absorbing the sequence of events. The Relians had once considered themselves untouchable. 3,000 years of military dominance, 12 star systems under their control, and unparalleled technological advances. And yet, all of that had been wiped away in just 6 months. Why? Because they thought stealing 2 human children would somehow force humanity to yield to their demands for mining rights. Castrix shook his head in disbelief as he scrolled through the aftermath footage. The Relian homeworld, once a thriving hub of civilization, had been transformed into molten glass by human weapons. Weapons they had no idea even existed. The Relians had underestimated the power of human resolve. They had failed to understand the most terrifying thing about humanity, the absolute and unyielding drive to protect their young. Castrix exhaled deeply, recalling the details of another incident. "Computer," he muttered. "Display the Morgan Colony incident. Case file 2192. New footage appeared. The image on the screen showed a peaceful first contact gone horribly wrong. A species known as the Zex had attempted to study human children by secretly observing them on a playground. When they were discovered, they refused to leave, citing scientific necessity. The humans, in response, had done something entirely unexpected. They hadn't used weapons. Instead, they simply released the colony's mothers into the Zek's observation post. The result was chaos. The entire research team had been hospitalized. 2 of them never recovered from the psychological trauma. Castrix leaned forward, his mind racing. He understood now that the humans did not act according to the cold, calculated principles of the galaxy. They acted on instinct, on something more primal, something that no other species could fully grasp. Back in the command center, Lieutenant Pax entered, carrying a stack of data crystals. He approached Castrix cautiously, his antennae twitching as he sensed the growing tension in the room. "Sir, I found the behavioral analysis you requested," Pax said, handing over the crystals. Castrix nodded in acknowledgement, then motioned for the data to be displayed. The room was filled with new footage. Human parents protecting their children. A small human female, lifting a ground transport vehicle to save her trapped child. A male human fighting off a predatory beast with his bare hands to protect someone else's offspring. Countless examples of humans putting themselves between children and danger, without hesitation, without thought for their own survival. Castrix pointed to footage. "Notice the pattern, Pax," he said quietly. "The humans show no regard for their own survival when a child is threatened. Their neural scans during these events are fascinating. The normal fear response is completely suppressed. In its place, they become something else." Pax's antennae twitched with interest as he studied the footage, a look of growing understanding spreading across his face. "Sir," Pax said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, "I think I understand now. These humans, they act as if their very existence depends on protection of the young. It's like a biochemical response." Castrix nodded gravely. "Yes. They release a cocktail of chemicals when their children are threatened: adrenaline, norepinephrine, testosterone, and something else. Something our scientists don't fully understand. They call it mama bear mode." The realization sent a ripple of unease through the room. Castrix wasn't finished. He wanted to delve deeper. The room darkened as the tactical display updated. A new alert flashed across the screen, drawing Castrix's attention. More ships. The system beeped. Human vessels, unknown configuration. Castrix's voice was calm, but tinged with foreboding. "Those Pax are what the humans call parent volunteer ships. Civilian vessels, crewed entirely by parents." Pax blinked, not sure he understood. "Not military ships, sir?" Castrix's lips curled into a grim smile. "No, they are not military. They are not bound by any rules of engagement, any codes of conduct, or any regulations. They are driven solely by the instinct to protect their children." The tactical display flickered again. "They're not just surrounding Captain Ven's ship," Pax murmured, his voice faltering. "They're surrounding our entire region of space." "Of course they are," Castrix said quietly, his voice cold and methodical. "They don't think like we do. We see 3 specimens, but they see 3 children, 3 babies who need to be rescued. And they won't stop until those babies are safe." Another update flashed across the screen. More human ships. More parents. The tactical officer's voice trembled. "Sir, they're not just deploying military ships. They're weaponizing civilian vessels on the spot. Mining lasers are being recharged for combat. Transport shields are being modified for warfare. They're even strapping FTL drives to cargo containers." Castrix leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "They've already begun, and they won't stop until those children are returned." Pax swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the situation. "Sir, there's more. A new classification of human threat. We've never seen anything like this before." Meanwhile, in the Galactic Union's command center, High Commander ENIAC stood at the central platform, his bioluminescent patches flickering with stress as he watched the unfolding situation. Reports were flooding in from every sector, an avalanche of intelligence, each one more troubling than the last. "Report," ENIAC barked, his voice sharp. He turned to communications officer, his eyes narrowing with anxiety. "What's the status on the human fleet?" The officer, pale and tense, checked the translation systems. "All diplomatic channels are silent, sir. The human ambassadors have withdrawn from every station. Their final message was, "You know what you did." NEX's eyes darkened. He turned back to the tactical display. Red dots, representing human warships, multiplied across the screen. They move with purpose, converging on Union space in an ever-tightening noose. "Show me their fleet movements," NEX ordered, his tone grim. Tessa, a tall proxy, manipulated controls. "Sir," she said, her crystalline form dimming with dread, "it's not just their military. Civilian ships are being weaponized on the spot. Mining lasers, transport shields. They're even repurposing cargo containers for war." NEX's expression hardened. "So, they're willing to go this far?" Tessa nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, sir, they are." NEX's mind raced as he processed the data. "What are those ships?" he demanded, noticing a new configuration on the screen. Tessa hesitated before answering, her voice tinged with a new sense of horror. "Soccer moms, sir." And NEX blinked, confusion flooding him. What is a soccer mom?" Tessa paused, her voice trembling. "According to our database, they're the most dangerous human demographic. They operate vehicles called minivans and are known for their aggressive protection of their offspring. These ships, these are space-worthy versions of their minivans." NEX's heart sank as he realized the magnitude of the threat before them. The humans had crossed a line. This wasn't just a diplomatic issue anymore. This was something far more dangerous. As the emergency command center buzzed with frantic activity, Castrix's voice echoed in the silent room. "Update the historical record. Note for future reference. When humans say, 'Don't talk to me or my son ever again,' it's not a request. It's a warning." And with that, the galaxy understood the full extent of what it meant to threaten a human child. The communications officer's voice quivered as he reported, "Sir, we intercepted a strange transmission. Something about free candy in a windowless van. When our troops went to investigate, they were overwhelmed by what the humans call PDA members." The room fell into an uneasy silence. This wasn't what they'd expected. No one had warned them about PDA members. But what followed only confirmed their worst fears. The tactical display updated again, flashing with disturbing information. Union forces weren't falling back from military strikes, but from waves of enraged parents, armed with everything from state-of-the-art plasma weapons to improvised tools that human mothers apparently kept in something called a purse. "Sir," called out the center officer, breaking the silence, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures. The humans, they're deploying something called timeout corners around our major installations." And NEX slammed his appendage down on the command console, the sound of it reverberating through the room. Why weren't we prepared for this? Where was our intelligence? A junior officer spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, we did have warnings. Multiple reports about human parental behavior. The incident at the Proxima Centauri Little League game. The Girl Scout cookie embargo of 2189. The time someone called a human baby ugly, the signs were there." Tessa, the tactical officer, nodded gravely. "We just didn't want to believe them." The room fell silent again. Another alert flashed on the display. A battle cruiser had surrendered. The cause? A flotilla of schoolteachers, armed with nothing but red marking pens and disappointed looks. "They're broadcasting something system-wide," the communications officer said, voice wavering. It's what they call a parent-teacher conference notice." The color drained from every alien face in the room. They had all studied the human education system. They knew exactly what that meant. "Sir," Tessa reported, her voice shaking, "human grandmothers have entered the sector. They're armed with something called guilt and objects classified as slippers. Our shields are useless against them." The situation was deteriorating fast. New alerts flooded the screen. The humans were deploying specialized units. Helicopter parents with actual combat helicopters, dance moms armed with weaponized attitudes, and band parents who had converted musical instruments into sonic weapons. "Direct hit to Outpost 7, someone shouted. "They sent something called a strongly worded email to the principal," another officer added. And NEX stared, stunned, as decades of military superiority crumbled in the face of this overwhelming onslaught of worried, determined parents. Union ships were retreating from formations being described as Karen formations, and border defenses were being dismantled by what Tactical had identified as Mother's intuition-guided missiles. Another transmission came in, and the communications officer announced, "They want to speak to our manager." And Niex narrowed his eyes. "Which manager?" "All of them," the officer replied, voice barely audible. Every alien in the room went still, realization dawning on them all at once. They hadn't just provoked the human military. They had provoked human parents. "Sir," Tessa reported quietly, "we're detecting another wave of ships. These ones, they're being powered by pure disappointment in our life choices." NEX's shoulders slumped as he sat back in his chair. "Send the order to all Union forces. Full retreat. Authorization code. Don't talk to me or my son ever again." As the command center scrambled to execute the retreat, a final message came through from the humans. It was short, simple, and more terrifying than any weapon it had ever faced. "Wait until your father gets home." The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Union had never been this crowded. Representatives from 37 species crammed into the crystalline amphitheater, their voices creating a cacophony of panic. High Commander NEX stood at the central podium, trying desperately to maintain some semblance of order. "Please, everyone, remain calm," he shouted over the noise. "The situation is under control." A new alert sounded, cutting him off. Another border station had fallen, this time to a group of human parents armed with minivans and snack packs. "Under control?" asked Ambassador Trill, her feathers bristling with disbelief. "The humans just weaponized something called the Baby Shark Song. 3 of our outposts surrendered immediately." Senior Intelligence Officer Castrix stepped forward, his expression grim. "If I may address the Council," he began, "we have a narrow window of opportunity to resolve this crisis." The chamber fell silent, the Council members hanging on his every word. On the main display, Captain Ven's ship appeared, still surrounded by an ever-growing fleet of human vessels. The sight of it made NEX's stomach churn. This was no longer just a military conflict. This was something more. It was a war of instincts, of protection, of parental love. Castrix's voice cut through the tension. "The humans do not operate like us. They do not think like us. They will stop at nothing to protect their young. Their resolve is unlike anything we've encountered before. If we do not act fast, we risk losing everything." NEX's mind raced. "We need to negotiate with them," he said. "We need to make them understand. We need to give their children back." At this, Castrix's expression hardened. "It is too late for negotiation, Commander. We have provoked a force beyond our comprehension. The human parents are not interested in diplomacy. They are interested in one thing only, their children's safety. And they will not stop until they have them." The council room descended into chaos once more as members from every species argued, shouted, and debated. The realization was sinking in. They had underestimated humanity, and now it was too late to turn back. As the voices rose in volume, a single thought echoed in the minds of all present. The galaxy had just learned what it truly meant to provoke a human parent. The readout displayed everything from military destroyers to repurposed ice cream trucks. "Our analysis shows that human parents become exponentially more dangerous the longer they are separated from their offspring," Castrix explained. "We must return these children immediately before they deploy their ultimate weapon." "What ultimate weapon?" someone asked. Castrix's scales darkened as he grimly replied. "According to our intelligence, they call it the Parent-Teacher Association." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even species without vocal cords somehow managed to gasp. "We've already lost contact with a proxy in Sector Zeta," reported General Zarks. "The humans didn't fire a single shot. They just showed up with something called participation trophies, and our troops lost all will to fight." The main screen flickered, a transmission coming through. The council chamber fell into deadly silence as the image resolved. It was a human female, wearing what intelligence identified as yoga pants and sporting a mom bun. "This is Sarah Chun, speaking on behalf of the combined parent forces," she announced calmly. "We're giving you one last chance to return our children before we deploy the MLMs." Castrix's eyes widened. Not the multi-level marketing schemes, he muttered. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our essential oils collection. Resistance is futile, Sarah continued, her voice unwavering. But wait, there's more. And Niek slammed his fist onto the console. Cut the transmission. We need options now. A science officer raised 3 of her tentacles. What if we explained that we were just doing research, that we had the children's best interests in mind? Negative, Castrix responded. The humans have a saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And right now, they're paving that road with our retreating forces. Another alert flashed. The humans had deployed something called baby pictures as psychological warfare. Entire Union squadrons were being immobilized by what the humans referred to as cute aggression. We must act now. NEX declared, Captain Venn, initiate the return protocol, and someone get me in contact with the human leadership. The communications officer shook her head. Sir, they say they need to check with the PDA board first. The council erupted into fresh panic. On the screen, more human ships arrived, this time covered in bumper stickers that read, Proud parent and honor student, and My child be up your honor student. Sir, called out a tactical officer, we're detecting a massive energy surge. The humans are charging there. Spit it out, soldier. And the ex barked. They're dad jokes, sir. They weaponize dad jokes. The color drained from every face in the chamber. They had studied human psychological warfare. They knew about dad jokes. The puns alone could devastate entire sectors. Initiate return sequence now. And the ex ordered, before they start asking if we have a hall pass. Captain Venn's voice came through, shaking. Sir, the children are ready for transport, but the humans are demanding something called a parent pickup authorization form. Give them whatever they want, someone shouted. My cousin was hit by a dad joke during the Orion conflict. He still groans involuntarily every time someone mentions the word hungry. Castrix stepped forward again, his expression grim. There's only one way to end this. We must submit to their most dreaded ritual, which is... And Niex asked, The parent conference, Castrix replied solemnly. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Everyone had heard the stories about parent conferences, the disappointment, the awkward silences, the passive-aggressive suggestions to apply ourselves more. Do it, and Niex commanded, and someone prepare a note explaining why we're late returning their children. Make sure it's signed by a guardian. The formal surrender of the Galactic Union to the combined parent forces took place in what humans referred to as an elementary school gymnasium. High Commander NEX still shuddered at the memory of sitting in those tiny plastic chairs, surrounded by construction paper art and motivational posters that read, Believe in yourself. 3 weeks later, he recorded his final report on the children incident. The consequences of our actions continue to reshape galactic society, he muttered, gazing out his office window at the new human embassy under construction. It looked strangely like a suburban home, complete with minivan landing pad and something called a juice box replicator. The return of the children was successful, he continued, though not without a few final incidents. Captain Venn had to endure something called a timeout, while the human parents inspected their offspring for scratch marks. She hasn't stopped apologizing since. The report continued, detailing the aftermath. The Galactic Union had established new protocols for all interactions with humans. The most important of these was a Universal Parental Alert System, or UPass. And Niex pulled up the new regulations on his screen. They were printed on colorful paper, decorated with little cartoon spaceships in the margins, a requirement that the humans had insisted upon. All Union species must now carry what humans call a permission slip for any activities near human settlements, he read aloud. These must be signed in triplicate by a designated space parent and notarized by someone called a room mother. Outside his window, a fleet of human ships patrolled. They had been modified to look like giant minivans, which somehow made them even more terrifying. The humans had established something called the Interstellar PDA. Their first act? To ban all unauthorized research on human children and institute a galaxy-wide policy called Stranger Danger. Their second act? To organize a bake sale, the proceeds of which somehow purchased 3 battlecruisers. NEX paused as his assistant entered the room with more reports. The top one was covered in glitter. Another new requirement for all official documents. The galaxy had changed forever, and the humans, led by their parents, had made sure of IT in the wake of the catastrophic children incident. The cultural impact on the Galactic Union had been nothing short of revolutionary. Several Union species had swiftly adopted human parenting practices in the hopes of avoiding another embarrassing conflict. The Proxen, a species known for their hive mind intelligence, had started something called playgroups. These groups were intended to promote social development for their young, though no one quite understood how to handle Proxen larvae, given their need for both social interaction and the ability to communicate telepathically at a group level. Meanwhile, the Zenari, an alien species of highly intellectual beings who were born as crystalline entities, had invented their own version of soccer moms. Their children, who were essentially large, sentient crystals that photosynthesized, were carefully raised in special environments that allowed them to absorb solar energy in a way that supported their growth. They even began participating in human-inspired activities such as solar-powered sports leagues, though the Zenari found themselves puzzled by concepts like team spirit and sportsmanship, as their children didn't interact with others the same way biological species did. Then there was Captain Venerable after an extensive psychological evaluation and some sensitivity training, a human concept that involved reflective exercises on emotions and social interactions. Ven had been reassigned to a much less glamorous role. She now served as an assistant teacher in a human preschool, her days filled with crayon snack time and endless rounds of Ring Around the Rosie. Despite her previous bravado in battle, Captain Ven was more terrified of this assignment than any military engagement she had ever faced. Her reports often mention how she spent the first few days simply hiding in the teacher's lounge, mentally preparing for the next onslaught of questions from curious toddlers. "Why is the sky blue?" one child had asked her. "Because it reflects the oceans," she had answered, unsure whether or not her answer was scientifically sound. Another child had asked, "Why are you so tall?" "I'm tall because I'm a grown-up," she responded weakly. But the child's response, "I'm going to be taller than you one day," nearly made her drop her lunch. The Union's mandatory training course, called How Not to Get Your Entire Species Grounded, had been rolled out across all Union personnel. It was an initiative spearheaded by the human parent forces, and all high-ranking officers were required to complete it. The course, taught by a panel of human grandmothers, had been highly effective. Each officer had to submit a report on their experiences, and many found themselves reflecting on their own upbringing. The course was both deeply unsettling and oddly informative. Officers learned how to express regret without the use of military jargon, how to manage temper tantrums, both their own and others, and how to provide constructive feedback in a way that didn't crush morale. Meanwhile, outside the Union headquarters, a human ship had just pulled over a Union transport ship for exceeding the posted speed limit in a school zone. The humans, in their strange and inexplicable manner, had enacted a new form of justice. "You've been speeding, and the fine is payable in cookies," a human officer had explained, showing a deep level of seriousness that sent shivers down the spine of a Union transport captain. While the Union had initially struggled to adapt to human customs, the humans had shared their concept of babysitting in daycare, though several Union species still couldn't quite grasp why sitting on babies was considered caretaking. The humans had also insisted on a specific time of day to care for the young, an idea that was almost alien to the Union forces, who operated without a concept of such structured schedules. One of the most significant cultural shifts came when the Union had to adjust to new forms of negotiation. All major treaties now had to be approved by something called a team parent. Military exercises could not take place during nap time, and all space stations were required to have designated timeout corners. These timeout corners were essential for de-escalating tensions, especially during particularly heated diplomatic encounters where tempers flared and one party was close to triggering an incident with their verbal outbursts. A new diplomatic challenge appeared when the humans began organizing field trips to the galactic core. The permission slips for these trips were 30 pages long, filled with stipulations on safety procedures, meal options, and consent forms. The Union's bureaucracy, already complex, was now being overwhelmed by the paperwork involved in every simple interaction with humans. Perhaps the most alarming development was the introduction of new threat assessment protocols. The highest level of alert was no longer imminent supernova, but rather angry mother looking for manager. This reclassification had profound consequences. Galactic space stations were equipped with something called baby gates, a bizarre defense system that appeared to serve no purpose other than preventing intergalactic beings from crossing a threshold without first obtaining permission. All ships entering Union space had to undergo a child safety inspection, something that was both time-consuming and, at times, infuriating for all involved. NEX, the commander of the Union forces, had learned to live with these new regulations. Although he had grown particularly tired of reviewing reports covered in glitter, another human-invented trend that had inexplicably swept across Union protocols. His personal log was now filled with notes about snow days and recess, two human concepts that had surprisingly led to a significant increase in overall productivity across the galaxy. The mandatory snack time and naps instituted by the humans had proven remarkably effective in boosting morale and reducing the levels of stress that had previously plagued Union workers. However, it was not all bad news. The humans, who had initially been seen as an unpredictable and strange species, had introduced some genuinely beneficial practices. For instance, parental leave had been adopted by Union species as a new method of ensuring work-life balance, while the introduction of playdates had provided much-needed opportunities for cross-species interaction in non-military settings. One of the most important changes was the new addition of a policy requiring every Union official to take something called parenting classes. It was a peculiar decision, but it seemed to have a lasting effect on Union leaders, who had previously been accustomed to a culture of control and authority. Parenting classes involved learning why stealing children was considered unacceptable, a concept that had been difficult for many species to understand, especially when the children in question were seen as valuable research specimens. As Enniak skimmed through the latest diplomatic reports, he sighed in resignation. The human forces had won, not through superior technology or firepower, but through something far more powerful: parental concern, backed by minivan diplomacy. They had forced the Union to adopt new laws of interstellar relations, and those laws now govern the very fabric of their society. One of the most impactful pieces of legislation was something called the Prime Directive of Parenting, which had been adopted as the first law of interstellar relations. The law was simple, direct, and terrifying. Don't make me come up there. The humans, through sheer force of will and their boundless love for their children, had succeeded in reshaping the Union's approach to diplomacy, law enforcement, and military strategy. As the day ended and NEX prepared to leave his office, he passed by the new plaque installed in the Union headquarters. It now read, "The Prime Directive of Parenting. Don't make me come up there." He left his office, on his way to perform one of his new responsibilities: carpool duty. It was a task assigned to all Union officials by the humans. According to them, it would build character, and, frankly, NEX wasn't sure whether or not he was ready for it. But as he boarded the transport to pick up children from their human-prescribed activities, he thought back to the lessons learned from the Parent-Teacher Association's intervention. The humans had won not by force, but by simply doing what was best for their children, and in the end, that had proven to be the most powerful strategy in the galaxy.